King Henry ruled the roost once again. The Vikings are 4-0 and looking really good. And then Bengals got a necessary but not sufficient win over the Carolina Panthers. All coming up next on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the good folks from Circa, from Underdog, and from Vivid Seats. I'm Jeff Erickson. He's Nick Whalen. Let's jump right into it, Nick. The Vikings made a big statement game against the Packers. Jumped off to a 28-0 lead in this one here. Sam Darnold looking great. One turnover late in this one. But for the most part, this was just a command performance by the Vikings. The Packers shot themselves in the foot countless times in this game, and all phases of the game too. Offense, defense, drop passes, missed, interceptions, missed kicks. This was still a game that could be had. I mean, even the fourth quarter, they get to 31-22, and they have 2 turnovers late. It was despite everything good that happened for the Vikings, the Packers, this game was still gettable.
Very strange game. Minnesota led 28-0 at the half, like you said, and Green Bay outscored them 29-3 in the second half. And, you mentioned some of those mistakes for Green Bay. I mean, they taking punts out of it. I believe they punted 3 times in this game. They threw away 8 possessions outside of punts. They had 3 interceptions. They lost a fumble. They had 2 missed field goals, which Braden Arvison, by the way, my goodness, the Packers have not solved their kicking issues. This is like year 4 of this becoming a massive problem for this franchise. And they also went out on downs twice. And, they were down big for so much of this game that, when they went out on downs, those were kind of desperation possessions. One of them was like a, 4th and 10, and you're just like, whatever, you got to go for it. And they threw to the end zone. But I think if Green Bay had known that they would eventually claw back into this game, they would have played it a little bit differently. Like, they were playing pretty reckless football, as you have to when you're down 4 scores going into the second half. But they gradually were able to climb back into it. And again, I mean, so many turnovers in this game. I mean, that late fumble by Tucker Kraft at the time, you're like, well, all right, they're down 2 scores. Probably wouldn't matter anyway. They end up putting another score on the board. And all of a sudden you're like, well, that fumble actually mattered a lot more than we thought. Very strange game for Jordan Love. I thought he looked mostly shaky. The fantasy numbers are going to end up looking okay, because he attempted 54 passes. He threw for almost 400 yards, over 7 yards per completion, threw 4 touchdowns, but threw 3 interceptions. At least 2 of those were just kind of insane throws. The one that got Christian Watson injured, and we'll talk about him in a moment. Yeah, I was thrown into triple coverage, and I just don't really know what Love was doing there. He was kind of doing that thing that we saw in week 1 against Philly, where he's drifting and throwing off the back foot. He threw another interception that was essentially a jump ball. I think it was Jaden Reed was the intended receiver. And he just whipped it up there. It was almost like he was under pressure, but he wasn't. And for some reason made this strange decision to just kind of throw this contested ball into the end zone on a 1st and 10. The Packers had just picked up a big play. You felt like momentum was starting to swing their way. And for some reason, Love just kind of lofts that one into the end zone. A very up and down game for the Packers offense in general. I mean, we saw both Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks are top 5 fantasy receivers on the week. They're wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3 right now heading into Monday Night Football. So it was a very strange game for both teams. Like, if you're Minnesota, yeah, you're happy to be 4-0, but you're like, man, we kind of blew a 28-0 lead. If you're Green Bay, you're upset that you got down 28-0, but you were able to claw your way back into it. I still got to feel pretty good about Minnesota, though. I mean, to be 4-0 and to rip off 3 straight wins against the Niners, the Texans, and the Packers. I mean, they now have one of the easiest remaining schedules in the NFL the rest of the way, because they've already knocked out 3 of their toughest opponents.
Exactly. To be able to do that. And, I was wrong about the Vikings defense. I had them too low. Although, was I? I mean, they still piled on all those yards late. Right. It was a bizarre game. Dontavian Wicks had this huge fantasy day. He had like a couple of drops. One was that 4th down play at the goal line. It was a contested catch, but it's one a good receiver comes down with. And that's something you just have to deal with there. The fact that the Packers went for it 4th and 8, 4th and 10 a couple times because they didn't trust their kicker. That was a big deal. And by the way, you think one of those 2 field goals would have been nice to have late in the game there too? Oh my goodness. I mean,
the first one was a 37-yarder. He missed a 37-yard field goal, and then the Packers, threw a pick on their next drive. They missed another field goal after that, threw another pick, and then went out on downs. I mean, it was a brutal offensive day for the Green Bay Packers. And, had it not been for a muff punt, which enabled Green Bay to put a touchdown on the board late in the second quarter, they would have had no momentum whatsoever. We saw a ton of muff punts, by the way, around the NFL.
Oh, the whole league.
Yeah, it was just muff punt city, especially in the early window. But you're right about Dontavian Wicks. I mean, I was talking to a lot of Packers fans throughout this game, and you see the 5 for 78. Both of those touchdowns came in the second half. They were a little garbage timey as Green Bay was trying to claw back in. I mean, he dropped 3 passes in this game, and a couple of them are a little bit behind, but that's been the issue with him, through these first few weeks of the season. He had opportunities, and they're not always perfect balls from Jordan Love, but they are catchable. And, if you're going to be a high level receiver in the NFL, these are the type of catches you have to bring in. There was another one too that hit him. It was kind of a jump ball situation. I think it was on a 4th down where Love threw it to the end zone, and it was contested. It's not you got to catch that one, but
you got to catch that one. You got to.
You have
to come down with
that. You don't have to, but you should. Underthrown ball from Love. Wicks does a great job of adjusting. He did have a defender there, but it hits him right in the shoulder pad. I mean, just right in the shoulder pad. And it's been tough because you see the potential with Wicks, but I will say Christian Watson's going to miss time here. They're already saying he's a candidate for IR. So if there was ever, a stretch here where you feel a little bit more comfortable starting Dontavian Wicks, I think these next 3 to 4 games are going to be that. And they also get the Rams and the Cardinals in their next 2. I think these are 2 really gettable defenses.
Yep. High ankle sprain for Watson.
Yeah.
So definitely.
That feels like a win based on how that looked.
Yeah, definitely. It could have been like an ECL. Could have been a lot of things there. A couple other quick notes here. Jordan Addison was back, and that just made that whole offense harder to stop too. Jefferson's not always going to be able to command double teams if Addison's that good. And I think that's something a big takeaway there. Naylor still produced. That was interesting. And Jefferson's still the man.
Jefferson's incredible, man. The touchdown he had with Keyshawn Nixon draped all over him. I mean, incredible catch by Jefferson. Also an incredible throw by Darnold to just put that right on his chest. And Jefferson essentially trapped it with one hand, which it feels like he does this once a week now at this point. Worth noting with Addison back in the mix, Jalen Naylor did only play 14 snaps. He ran 12 routes on those 14 snaps, was targeted twice, did get a carry as well. But he was actually 5th among Vikings receivers in total snaps behind Brandon Powell and Trent Sherfield as well. So, somebody who had been kind of subsisting on touchdowns through the first few weeks of the year, probably not going to be overly viable in the vast majority of fantasy leagues as long as Addison is healthy. Another really strong game from Sam Darnold. I mean, I'm a believer in this Vikings team, man. I think the defense obviously showed up early in this game. They were able to generate 4 turnovers. They were able to get some big stops when they needed them. I don't know what else we need to see from Minnesota. I mean, Sam Darnold's 13-1 right now to win MVP. I think that says it all.
That is, and Vikings are well positioned. In the NFC, not the NFFC. They probably are there too. But
they are.
If you have Vikings there. Aaron Jones, 22 for 93, didn't get to do his Lambeau leap, but also 4 for 46 through the air. Big game out of him too. He looks so good right now.
Yeah, he's been really good. With Aaron Jones, you're waiting for him to get banged up. It hasn't happened yet. I think they've been smart about how they've used him. Had a few opportunities where you felt like, man, he was like one broken tackle away from finding the end zone, but a really nice game for him overall. Last thing I'll say on this one before we move on, Vikings are 2.5-point favorites only at home against the Jets next week. I like that spot for Minnesota. I would not be surprised if that moves closer to 3 over the next few days. And we'll talk about the Jets and what
let's
they
talk about them next. Yeah,
the atrocities that they committed this week against Denver.
All right, let's talk about that right now because again, this was the survivor pick for a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
And 2 weeks in a row, the Broncos just eliminated a sizable chunk of survivor players. I'm in the pentathlon that Derek Van Riper runs, triple elimination survivor pool. I went with the Jets. I thought, okay, at home against the Broncos, they're going to take care of business. They did not. They were horrible in this game. Now, weather had something to do with it there. It was nasty. It was a nasty game, but come on, guys. This is just a horrible game. Kudos to the Broncos defense. They're legit. But Jets, come on. Breece Hall got 10 carries for 4 yards in this one here. What happened?
Well, I think the weather happened. That was the number one thing. I mean, this did kind of remind me of that fabled 49ers Bears game from week 1 a couple of years ago, where it's like, everything is pointing, to one side. And then you're like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot to check the weather. And, you could tell early on. I mean, this was affecting both teams. I mean, you look at the drive chart to begin this game fumble, punt, 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 fumble, field goal, punt, 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 field goal in the first half. And both of those field goals were, of course, via the New York Jets, who they just couldn't finish drives. They could not finish drives, throughout this game. Obviously, you put up 9 points. Those are 3 field goals. The same issues I think that even when the Jets have been humming, they have 2 wins, obviously, it's just such a narrow offense. And really for the 4th straight week, you're just waiting for the Garrett Wilson breakout, and he's basically putting up the same line every single week. He's faced some really good corners. I think that's worth noting, and he might have faced the best of them all this week in Pat Surtain, but 8 targets, caught 5 of those for 41 yards. It's just kind of what he's doing every single week. And we did see a little bit more Mike Williams involvement. He had a big catch in the second half. Obviously, Alan Lazard is always going to get his with Aaron Rodgers, but the Jets could not get the running game going whatsoever. You mentioned Breece Hall, 10 carries for 4 yards. They ended up going away from him, as the game went along, and we saw a lot of passing from the Jets, even though it really wasn't all that effective. Braylon Allen worked his way into the mix, but just 8 for 34 for him. I mean, Aaron Rodgers out rushing Breece Hall, that is not a recipe for success.
No, not at all. Braylon Allen got 8 carries for 34, so at least he was somewhat effective. Yep. Breece Hall's long run was 3 yards. 3. Right. Just not.
It was bad, man.
Yeah, he's your first round pick. No.
Yeah, he did outstat Braylon Allen 51-27. Out carried him 10-8. So it almost feels more of like a Rachaad White, Bucky Irving thing, where like when Braylon Allen's out there, he tends to get the ball, but you're still going to see a lot more Breece Hall. And look, I feel way better about Breece Hall than I do Rachaad White. I don't want to have any confusion there, but the Jets are not creating big plays right now on the ground, and it's certainly been frustrating for both Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. Obviously, we need to mention that Bo Nix had negative passing yardage in the first half. Negative passing yardage despite completing, I think, 6 or 7 passes. Cortland Sutton accounted for all 60 of the Broncos passing yards in this game, despite like 6 other players having a reception. But there were so many negative plays for the Broncos offense that it all kind of offset. But they were able to get the ground game going a little bit, at least in the second half. I mean, we saw Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin rip off some big plays to ultimately put Denver ahead. And the Jets had a chance, by the way, to win this game. And we saw Greg Zuerlein come in for a nice shanked field goal that would have won it.
Yeah. Always. Yeah. And again, weather conditions being what they are, but it was a shank. Yeah, it was definitely a shank there too.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about defenses that didn't show up, unlike this game. But first, quick note from our friends over at Vivid Seats. And Vivid Seats has been a good sponsor of us for a long time. NFL football is back. Gear up for the gridiron with Vivid Seats and score tickets to the biggest games of the year. Every touchdown, every tackle, and every eye-popping play of your favorite team, live and in person. And with Vivid Seats rewards, you earn perks with every single purchase. Each ticket you buy gets you closer to your reward. Just buy 10 tickets, then simply cash in your credit toward the 11th ticket purchase. It's that easy. Plus, Vivid Seats is offering you $20 off your first $200 ticket purchase with code RotoWire. That's code RotoWire, ROTOWIRE. From the upper deck to the front row, Vivid Seats has great tickets for all the 2024 games that matter to you. Just visit vividseats.com or download the app today. Vivid Seats. Experience it live. Thanks to Vivid Seats. As always, we've used them before. I've gotten a lot of good results going to ball games through Vivid Seats. Nick, a couple of surprising results to me. The most surprising to me is just the utter no-show by the Philly defense against Tampa Bay. Jim Coventry kind of called it. We were talking about our rankings, and he said, this is a matchup. This is just not a good matchup unless they can generate pressure on Mayfield. They couldn't generate pressure on Mayfield. They shut down the Saints the week before against the Bucs. It was like boom, boom, boom. Early on, game over.
Yeah, Philly, briefly threatened to get back into this game. I mean, it felt like it was over early in the second quarter when Tampa Bay went up 24-0, but the Eagles were able to put a touchdown on the board. And, this was a 10-point game early in the second quarter. Eagles got the ball out at halftime, cut it to 24-10, but immediately allowed another touchdown and then, fumbled in Tampa Bay territory on their next drive, and that essentially sealed it. But yeah, Tampa Bay completely no-showed last week. We saw the complete opposite this time around. I mean, at one point, Jeff, they were outgaining the Eagles 255-0. 255-0. The Eagles could get nothing going on their first 3 or 4 drives of the game. Saquon Barkley, had a long 60-yard run that basically accounted for, like 80% of his production in this game. Ended up having a decent fantasy day solely because of that run. He also had 3 cracks at the goal line and got stuffed every single time. So probably should have added a touchdown to that. Jalen Hurts ended up plunging it in from the 1 yard line. Eagles went 3 and out on their first 3 drives, and they had a muff punt. And this was one where it was completely unnecessary. Cooper DeJean, their rookie corner, was, calling for a fair catch, and the gunner for the Eagles just shoved a Buccaneer into DeJean.
That's right.
Shoved it right into him. And, the NFL, it was the right call. It was actually a really good job, I think, by the officials to notice that and not call the play dead and say, yeah, that's a live ball, man. You pushed him into it. So it was just kind of a comedy of errors for the Eagles early on. They couldn't run the ball. Obviously, no Devontae Smith or A.J. Brown. We knew that would limit this passing game. And, I mean, this is the 3rd straight week now with at least one of those guys out, but they're just not getting other receivers involved. I mean, it was essentially 100% Dallas Goedert and Saquon Barkley. They were accounting for, anything the Eagles were getting offensively was just running through those 2 guys. Paris Campbell, had a touchdown. That's great. Didn't really do much else. Jahan Dotson still just running around out there.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is when I was updating the value meter and just trying to, okay, what Eagle wide receiver do I bump up? And I just couldn't. I bumped up Dotson a little bit. Paris Campbell, who's inactive half the time, they had to activate him. And, it's like, okay, well, he's going to be, active this week. Yeah. He got 4 targets though. There's no there. I mean, it just shows that, how, I guess most teams, you take away the top 2 receivers. This is what happens. Dallas Goedert got his 8 targets. He was fine, but and for a tight end, you'll take 13 fantasy points, by the way. You'll take that almost all the time. It was a surprising no-show from the defense early on in this one here. Another surprising no-show, maybe not surprising, Arizona, just nothing in this game. They could not. Once again, the Commanders cannot be stopped.
Commanders are incredible, man. I mean, this is just an unreal offense. I think there's a stat at one point through that game, they had scored on 15 consecutive drives dating back to last week against Cincinnati. I mean, this is a juggernaut of an offense, man. And, I think the offensive line has been something that has surprised me. Obviously all the talk is going to be about Jaden Daniels, and the running game has been great, but there was no pressure really on Jaden Daniels throughout this game. And part of that is he's able to move around in the pocket and kind of get away from that. But, was not pressured on 25 of his first 30 attempts in this game per The Athletic. The Commanders are number 1 in the NFL in offensive EPA by a mile right now. It's not even close. They're scoring on almost 70% of their drives through 4 games. That's the best in the league by about 10 percentage points. We saw Terry McLaurin involved again this week. That was something I wanted to keep an eye on. It's like, all right, was that just a Bengals thing last week? But no, they got him involved. He got a touchdown, 10 targets for Terry McLaurin. Commanders outscored Arizona 42-7 after allowing a quick touchdown to the Cardinals on that opening drive. I mean, it looked like we were set for a shootout. It was kind of similar in some ways to the Arizona-Detroit game last week where, all right, Arizona comes out and scores. You're like, all right, here we go. And they just got nothing after that. And again, much like Cincinnati last week, couldn't get off the field. Washington had 29 first downs. They were 10 of 13 converting 3rd and 4th downs.
Yeah, it's just it's incredible. The running game is so effective, and
really
you look at a scrambling quarterback, and that does open up lanes for the running backs. But man, Brian Robinson is great. Jeremy McNichols back from the dead, 2 touchdowns. I thought maybe, okay, Chris Rodriguez is going to be active. McNichols might not do much. No, McNichols was great. He finished off the game. Got a taunting penalty to boot there at the end. That was just a nice, chef's kiss there on that game. I'm shocked though that Arizona wasn't more effective moving the ball. I mean, we've seen the Commanders; they can't really stop people. But Kyler Murray got sacked 4 times. James Conner got his. Trey Benson actually ran well, but I think that was all garbage time late. But yet you look and they couldn't get those 3rd downs. They got the horrible timing, the 4 sacks. Murray only threw the ball 22 times, despite them getting blown out. They put the ball on the ground a ton. Just all around pretty ugly game for them.
Yeah, and they were able to run on the Commanders, like you said. I mean, James Conner was getting almost 6 yards per carry. Trey Benson, Amari DiMercado, those guys both ran effectively as well. It was just, kind of too little, too late for the Cardinals. And I think they really missed Trey McBride in this one. I mean,
yes, they did.
That really, this is not a team that has a ton of reliable pass catchers. And I still think Trey McBride is the guy that Kyler Murray looks to more than anybody, even more than Marvin Harrison, who did only have 6 targets in this game. They didn't really get much out of Michael Wilson. You're always looking for the big play out of Greg Dortch. That didn't really come this week. And it is worth noting that I think this was a closer game through the first half than you might expect. I mean, Arizona was down 14-7 They got the ball with about 3 minutes left in the second quarter, drove it into Washington territory, and Kyler Murray got sacked on a 4th and 1. Just kind of a brutal play call. It was dead from the start.
Yep.
In retrospect, you probably wish you just take the long field goal attempt there. If you convert that, I think it's maybe a different story. And there was enough time left on the clock because he lost so much yardage on the sack that Washington basically took over at midfield and was able to put a field goal on the board and they were able to double up. They got the ball out of the third quarter, put a touchdown on the board, and all of a sudden it went from 14-7 to 24-7 in a heartbeat.
Yeah, exactly. And you look at Arizona, they got a kicker that can kick long distance too. So that was a very critical play in the game. 82 yards and penalties too for them. So they added that to the lack of discipline there. One other defense that I just didn't show up is Buffalo getting pushed around by Baltimore last night. Derrick Henry, King Henry ruled the roost on this one here. I guess Buffalo was probably due for a game like this. I got this game wrong. I thought, hey, I'm getting points with Josh Allen. I'll got to go that way. Hey, I fell for that. I fell for it. My bad.
Yep.
But Ravens, they've gotten well after a tough and it wasn't like they were playing poorly those first two games with those first two losses. They're a toe away from tying the game in Kansas City or going for 2 and trying to win. And then they had a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter against the Raiders and blew it. So you knew that they were playing reasonably well, but they've really turned it up the last 2 weeks.
I thought of their 4 games so far, this was the one where things looked easy for them for the first time. And I didn't necessarily think that would happen against the Buffalo Bills. I mean, the Ravens were ripping off like 8 yards per play through this game. And it was even higher than that during the competitive portion of the game. And, when it starts with Derrick Henry ripping off an 87-yard touchdown on the first play from scrimmage, you just kind of knew where this game was heading. And, I thought the consistent pressure that Baltimore was able to generate on Josh Allen, that was also something we had not seen. I mean, how many plays did it feel like, Jeff, if you were watching this game last night, where Josh Allen is just like sprinting to the sideline and at the last second, he's either throwing the ball away or he's trying to get something downfield.
Exactly.
Yeah, they did hit the one long one to Khalil Shakir, which kind of felt like the only momentum Buffalo had generated at any point in that game. And then, of course, they fumble, later in that, or I think on their next drive, and that basically ended it. But yeah, Josh Allen, I mean, out of the pocket, he got sacked 3 times. He really wasn't able to use his legs effectively, carried 5 times for only 21 yards. Terrible day if you were expecting anything like I was out of James Cook. I mean, this game got away from Buffalo so early that they couldn't really pound James Cook the rest of the way. But it was surprising. I'm not shocked that Baltimore won this game at home. I'm pretty shocked at the fashion that it happened. I mean, this game felt like it was over by the end of the first quarter.
Exactly. I mean, Henry really set the tone on that one there. This game was reminiscent of the Baltimore formula last year, where they blew out some really good teams at home. Yep. Remember the Detroit game last year?
Yep.
Just a really good team, Detroit. Team that went to the NFC Championship game just was a complete smash job in that one there. And Baltimore has a way of doing that, and things kind of just it gets downhill, and the next thing you know, it's over. When Baltimore's at their best, that's what they do.
Yeah. And I will say the Bills had a chance to get back into this game. They put that touchdown on the board after that long play to Shakir. They force a punt, a 3-and-out, immediate 3-and-out right after that. They had a promising drive. They're over midfield, and then they kind of tried this trick play, with I think it was Curtis Samuel got the snap, and then they pitch it back to Allen, and he ends up, getting stripped on what was supposed to be, essentially like a rollout flea flicker. I don't really know what Buffalo was doing.
Right.
I don't know why they broke that play out. Like, I know you'd had trouble generating any sort of offense prior to that, so maybe you felt like you had to do something a little fluky, but it was an 11-point game. You're over midfield. I mean, at the very least, if you're able to put a field goal on the board, it's a 1-score game. And that's when you kind of knew it was over. Allen got shaken up a little bit on that play. Took a huge hit. I think it was Kyle Hamilton who hit him. Kyle Van Noy ended up forcing the fumble. And then, Baltimore's able to take that drive down for a touchdown. And all of a sudden it's an 18-point game. So there were chances here for Buffalo, as poorly as they played early on. I think if that one drive and that one fumble doesn't happen, maybe we get something interesting. But more than anything, you got to tip your cap here to the Baltimore Ravens, who, 2-2 start. You're not feeling great about it. You're still ruining that week 2 loss to the Raiders, but interesting in-division game in week 5, Jeff, as they go to the Cincinnati Bengals. Another defense that I think is still showing a little more or too many cracks compared to what you would hope for.
Yeah. I was just going to say that's going to be our next topic, our homer teams. Before we do that, though, quick note from our friends at Underdog. Thanks. Those of you listening live, you get to skip those today. Congratulations on that. All right. Jaguars, Bengals. Jaguars and Bengals. We don't have a Monday night game on either of those teams. Let's talk about what happened yesterday. We'll start off with Bengals and the Carolina Panthers. As I teased earlier on, necessary but not sufficient. The Bengals won. They beat the Panthers. They still looked very vulnerable. I mean, they had a courageous goal line stand on the first drive. But I mean, the Panthers moved the ball so readily. The Bengals got a turnover that was kind of lucky. Hendrickson tipped the ball as Dalton was throwing it, led to an interception. That was huge for the Bengals. They got the score right before the half. They got the score right after the half. They got that extra possession basically, and then they kind of held on for dear life after that.
Yeah, Bengals scored touchdowns on 3 straight possessions after punting on their first possession, but they also allowed touchdowns right after 2 of those. And I was expecting a little bit more of a comeback to earth game for Andy Dalton, who I thought looked pretty good in this one. Like you said, did have the 1 interception, but a bit of a fluky play. The Bengals run defense just remains a catastrophic issue right now. Chuba Hubbard, almost 6 yards per carry for him. They allowed Miles Sanders to get going. That is never a great sign for any defense. Another good spot for Deontay Johnson. I didn't want to roll him out there in DFS or anything because he was injured coming into the week. I was like, is he going to make it through? He looked fine. 7 for 83 with a touchdown on 13 targets. We saw a lot more Xavier Legette this week as well with no Adam Thielen. He goes 6 for 66 with a touchdown on 10 targets. You got to be happy with the Bengals getting a win here. They did cover as well. I thought after that bizarre Joe Burrow interception, I don't know what he was doing on that.
That wasn't his fault. The game. That was Chase. So they and this is one where watching like the full play on that, it's a scramble drill, right? And Chase is going one way as Dalton's getting ready to throw. As he's going through it, Chase veers off. Dalton thought Burrow thought he was going to keep going into there's this big open space too. It was going to hit for a big play, and instead Chase turned it. And so that's just maybe maybe it wasn't maybe it's not Chase's fault. Maybe there's some sort of protocol they have in the scramble drill there. Fact is, Burrow thought he was going one way. Chase broke it off the other way. That's what happened there.
All right. There we go. This is why we have a Bengals insider on the pod. See, I'm just thinking Joe Burrow just whipped that into the void. But either way, that gave Carolina a chance to at least threaten to cover, and thank goodness they did not. We had the Bengals in the Circa contest. I think you look at the Panthers wide receiver situation, and we can talk about the running backs in a moment. But I think Xavier Legette now it's got to be firmly on the fantasy radar. Maybe he's maybe not an every week starter because I think Cincinnati is such an advantageous matchup that you can't expect this week to week. They do have a pretty tough matchup at the Bears next week, and then they get the Falcons after that. I don't know that I'd feel great about starting Legette in either of those. They do play the Commanders later in October. That could be a spot for him, but he led the Panthers in snaps, led the Panthers in routes run, also carried twice in this game. So I do think he's going to be a much bigger part of this offense with no Thielen.
Yeah. Deontay Johnson got banged up briefly. He kind of went down on a non-contact thing. He was worried he hurt his groin. Then he came back in the game later on. Legette and I think and Mingo both had drops in this one that were kind of critical. So that I think especially the Mingo one was a big one, if I recall correctly. They also had a drop or a breakup on a fake punt. Hecker put it on target. Felipe Franks got it stripped. He just as he's trying to put it away. I think a more common target holds on to that ball. That was a big play in that game too. I mean, the Bengals, the other good thing from the Bengals perspective is they were able to run the ball. Chase Brown in particular looked really, really good on this one. Zach Moss had a big touchdown on a reception right before the half. If he gets tackled, the Bengals were out of timeouts. They don't score. Instead, they get a touchdown. That was massive. Little things all went the Bengals' way. So they needed this win. They got a lot longer way to go, but they got that at least. There's still plenty to fix. 0 sacks for the Bengals pass rush, though. 0.
Yeah, I was going to mention that as well. The lack of pressure was noticeable throughout this game, and I mean it was a hell of a job by Zach Moss to get into the end zone on that play. I mean he had to run through 3 tacklers. I did have a Zach Moss anytime touchdown bet going.
Oh,
so
nice.
I want to thank him personally for that. We had a great day on the props yesterday. Not so great on our spread picks. But yeah, Chase Brown looked a lot more effective. They both carried 15 times out of the backfield. Chase Brown was significantly better, significantly more dynamic than Zach Moss. On the Carolina side of things, another great day for Chuba Hubbard. He's the RB6 on the week heading into Monday night. Chase Brown, by the way, is the RB5 after putting up 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Did see a decent amount of Miles Sanders behind Chuba, but keep in mind, Jonathan Brooks could make his return as soon as next week. So the viability on Chuba, especially with those two matchups that I mentioned coming up, it might be running out. I think I kind of want to see it first as far as, what is Jonathan Brooks' role? I don't think they're just going to throw him out there for 50 snaps right away. I think it's going to be gradual, but 2, 3, 4 weeks from now, I think we could have a Bucky Irving situation ongoing with Jonathan Brooks.
The difference is Chuba Hubbard's playing well, whereas Rachaad White was not. But
correct.
But yeah, I agree. He's the first running back drafted. They invested significant draft capital. Yep. You're going to have to see Brooks out there if viable. Mm-hmm. A running back that wasn't out there early on yesterday was Travis Etienne. The broadcast was making a big point of him standing not near the offensive coordinator on that first couple of drives. What's going on with that running back situation in Jacksonville?
Yeah, I mean, Etienne got banged up in this game. It was strange that he wasn't out there early on. We saw a lot of Tank Bigsby. Etienne still ended up having a pretty reasonable workload, but, injured his shoulder, took a really hard hit. I think it was in the second quarter of this game, and he just kind of wondered how that affected his usage. But he ended up playing 30 snaps out of a possible 58. Tank Bigsby played 17. Dearness Johnson, for some reason, was out there as well. He played 12 snaps, carried twice. Etienne, still the carry leader, carried on 11 of those 30 snaps, was targeted twice out of the backfield. The Jags are the Jags. You never really felt like they were going to win this game. There were a couple inflection points that we'll get to that I think, maybe would have changed things. This is yet another team that was gifted a muff punt. First punt of the game. Jags go 5 and out on their first drive. Muff punt at the 2-yard line. Instant touchdown to Brian Thomas. We're rolling early on. Trevor Lawrence missed 2 wide open deep balls. Both of these would have been walk-in touchdowns, one to Brian Thomas and one to Christian Kirk. That was even more egregious later in the game. Even despite that, though, I mean, this was pretty easily the best performance of the year for Christian Kirk. Team high 12 targets, caught 7 of those for 61 and a touchdown. I continue to be just extremely impressed with Brian Thomas. He is so good. 6 for 86 and a touchdown on 9 targets. Did have a penalty that ended up stalling out a drive in the third quarter. He was flagged for a potential gun celebration, which the 2 fingers were out. It was more of a first down. This was not a Drake London, loading up the machine gun situation from that game against Philly. The refs kind of took over that one. I mean, people were putting out screenshots of like other Texans players doing the exact same thing throughout the game, and it was not flagged. So that was one of a number of things that kind of went against Jacksonville, but it's a team that continues to shoot itself in the foot, man. I mean, the missed deep balls, giving up a long drive where like Daria Gumbawale is moving the ball all over you when you absolutely need a stop. Houston, though, again, lucky in some ways to win this game. I mean, I think they're so lucky to be 3-1. I mean, this is a team that commits a ton of penalties, almost 100 yards in penalties yet again for the Texans. They are by far the most penalized team in the NFL, specifically on offense so far this season. Jags, by the way, are 11 of 44 on third downs this season. That is the third worst mark in the NFL, ahead of only Cleveland and Denver. Yeah, Jags are 0-4. I think we can officially say that the season is probably over here.
Yeah, and after the game, Peterson was defending Perez Taylor again for the play calling and all that. It's coming.
The play calling was actually not that bad this week, I will say. I mean, Trevor Lawrence missed some huge throws. And then the thing that really, and this is just such a Jags thing to happen, Tank Bigsby rips off like a 58-yard run. Jags are up 20-17 at this point. And this is like at the end of the third quarter. There's less than a minute left in the third. They're up 20-17. 58-yard run. First and goal at the 4. The Jags do not score in that situation. They end up passing on a field goal. They try to run a Trevor Lawrence QB keeper on 4th and goal, and was just immediately stuffed. Stuffed. So if Jacksonville's able to cash that in, they probably win this game. Yeah.
And it's the thing that just, bad teams do. That's what that's what happens. Just you can't get out of your own way. Since we can't say shooting yourself in the foot, as Chuck Noble points out there.
You're going to get flagged if you say that.
All right. Our friends over at Circa are back with us here. Here's one of their ads real quick. All right. Thank you for your thanks to Circa. We love Circa. You know that. We go there every year. Happy to do that. Anthony Richardson got hurt against the Steelers, and yet the Colts still pulled away and won. Now, this game surprised me, Nick. I thought, hey, Steelers are less than 3-point favorites. I feel very good about this. Didn't happen.
Yeah, I was on the Steelers -1.5. I was on the under 40 in this game, and those things were both contingent on Anthony Richardson playing a full 4 quarters because I thought he would commit mistakes. I thought he would limit this Colts offense as he has through the first 3 weeks of the season. I did not want to see Joe Flacco out there. That's not what you want if you're looking for an under in a Steelers Colts game, and that was dead. Pretty much immediately. Joe Flacco woke up this Colts passing game. Suddenly, Michael Pittman all of a sudden is back in the mix. 6 for 113 for him. Did have a long completion, by the way, from Richardson before Joe Flacco came into this game, but still, he had not approached anything close to this kind of production through the first 3 weeks. We saw Josh Downs heavily involved. He had a touchdown, 8 for 82 on 9 targets. Jonathan Taylor, by the way, came out of this game with an ankle injury. Colts are saying that they don't think it's overly severe, but still something that could cost him a little bit of time. Going to be watching that closely in the next week. He went 21 for 88 and a touchdown. And we'll see on Richardson. I mean, I think the news coming out of this game seems to be relatively positive. I think they're just calling it a hip pointer. I mean, it looked extremely painful. Richardson gets banged up, kind of stays in the game and takes another hit to that hip like 2 plays later. And you essentially knew he was done for the day after that. But it goes without saying, it's a totally different Colts team with Joe Flacco out there. I mean, this looked a lot more like last year's Colts compared to the Colts offense that we'd seen through 3 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. And Taylor still got his before that. And you know what? Because of that, it was a totally different Steelers offense too. They fell behind. So Fields had to throw the ball 34 times. He got sacked 4 times, but he actually played pretty well otherwise. 312 passing yards, 9.2 yards per attempt. George Pickens was heavily targeted, went for 113 yards. Freiermuth scored. The Steelers didn't run the ball very well. At least Harris didn't run the ball very well. Patterson had some good runs and then got banged up a little bit, but they had to go to the passing game a lot more often. That's not the way they like to roll.
No, this was not the script for Pittsburgh. And I think if you had told me the Colts are going to score 27 points, I would have said, all right, I am definitely not taking the Steelers -1.5 because these are not the type of games the Steelers want to play. If you're combining for over 50 points, that's never going to be good for Pittsburgh. But the Steelers did have over 400 yards of offense. I mean, despite being forced out of the script that I think they wanted to run in this game, they were able to hang in pretty effectively. 2 killer turnovers. There's one like comical self-sack fumble from Justin Fields, and then George Pickens a little bit reckless with the ball, caught a ball along the sideline, was trying to fight for extra yardage. He's holding the ball, like palming it with one hand, and it got knocked out. Just a little bit unlucky because he was so close to the sideline. Like, it was just kind of the way the ball bounced. It ended up staying in bounds, but that took points off the board. Either would have been a touchdown or at worst a chip shot field goal for the Steelers. And obviously this was a 3-point game. So a couple of things went against Pittsburgh. Couldn't get stops when they absolutely needed to. I think this is a pretty disappointing day for this defense. Obviously, you were prepared for a different quarterback, and I think Flacco coming in maybe threw them off a little bit. We saw Darnell Washington a little bit more involved in this offense. I mean, unless you're in a really deep league, you're probably not too worried about that. It was still a solid day for Pat Freiermuth, 5 for 57 and a touchdown. Najee Harris got his 3 for 54 through the air. Didn't do a whole lot running the ball, however. I mean, this Colts run defense has looked a little bit better the last couple of weeks. I mean, they were getting run all over the first 2 weeks of the year, but they were able to shut down Chicago and pretty much completely shut down Najee Harris. 13 carries for 19 yards for Najee Harris. Justin Fields, though, did run in 2 touchdowns. He is the QB1 in fantasy heading into Monday night.
That's wild. That's although it's not that wild. I mean, you already, when Fields started last year, he was always a fantasy viable quarterback. It seemed like just because of the running, and this was an extreme example of that. Things are going the way of the Ravens, though. I mean, the Steelers lost, the Ravens won. They look like they're great again, and the Browns look terrible. You called this one. You were on Raiders. You were on the Raiders. You said you wanted them. You had them winning outright, and sure enough, they did. And boy, the Browns can't get out of their own way.
I mean, I said that before I knew that Devontae Adams and Max Crosby were out of this game. So had I known that, I think I would have just stayed away entirely. And the Browns were up 10-0 at the end of the first quarter. I wouldn't say it looked like the Browns were going to run away with this game because that's not something that Cleveland is capable of doing. But they were in a pretty good spot early on here, and Cleveland's just a total mess, man. They are a total mess. And one of my bold predictions this week in the video that I do for our YouTube is that this would be Deshaun Watson's last start. I think that's possible given the situation, but I actually don't think Watson was the issue this week. I actually thought he played
the 4th down
well.
play at the end.
Yeah, you can't take a sack there. Absolutely can't take a sack there. Yeah. He threw an interception, but that was a great throw to Amari Cooper that hit him right in the hands and ended up being tipped up for a pick that was returned for big yardage. I thought Watson actually looked pretty decent. Just limited weaponry for Cleveland. It just feels like a completely toothless offense. One of their scores in this game ended up coming on a pick six, and a fumble return for a touchdoon. Right. And they had like an 85-yard touchdown pulled off the board late in this game that probably would have swung the result. I believe they called, I think it was technically a hold, but it essentially looked like a lineman for the Browns kind of pushed a Raiders player in the back. Pretty unnecessary. Maybe it prevented a sack. But if that play ends up standing, we're probably talking about a different result. Either way, if you're Cleveland, after you go up 10-0, it doesn't feel like it should have come to this for a Raiders team that struggled to move the ball the entire day. I mean, I thought this would be a great spot for Brock Bowers. This is 2 straight weeks where he's just not been involved. Only 3 targets for Bowers.
Yeah. The Raiders offense is really bad. I mean, I think that's the real takeaway from that. I mean, they won despite a bad offense there. Amari Cooper. This was the Amari Cooper of week 2 against the Jaguars, where he made some just confounding plays. The drop / interception, had a couple others like that. You're just like, what's going on with this guy? Obviously his day would have been salvaged with a huge touchdown that got pulled off the board. But still, it's just one of those things where it's like, can't figure things out with them. Jerome Ford, he had a late run for 35 yards. Yep. Otherwise, it would have been a nothing day for him. They barely even ran the ball. They only had 22 attempts. I guess that's what happens when you're not moving the ball. They had a chance to win this game, though, still, too.
Oh, yeah.
They missed an extra point, which meant they had to go for the touchdown. Watson didn't throw the ball on 4th down on the sack. Just throw it anywhere. Just throw it up for grabs. That's one of my least favorite things ever in football is when 4th down, the game on the line, you just throw it. It doesn't matter if they're open, just throw it. Yeah. You got to throw it. And he couldn't.
It was bad. It was bad. The Browns were moving the ball on that possession too. I mean, it probably shouldn't have even come down to a 4th down. I mean, it essentially stalled out, against this terrible Raiders defense. You also can't allow the Raiders to run the ball as effectively as they did. I mean, over 5 yards per carry as a team. And, that's factoring in, like Gardner Minshew, who, ran for negative yardage. Alexander Mattison went 5 for 60. Zamir White, 17 for 50. Wildly inefficient for Zamir White, but this was still far and away the best ground game day for the Raiders so far this season. I mean, they have been disastrous running the ball, like historically bad running the ball through 3 games. And you run for over 150 yards on this Browns defense. I know they're injured. The Browns have more injuries than any team in the NFL right now. I get that. That is part of the equation. I think especially the offensive line being as banged up as they are, that's a problem. But you can't let the Raiders establish a ground game. I mean, that was the one big surprise for me, is that the Raiders were actually able to effectively move it. Yeah.
And the thing is, Zamir White, 17 for 50, and it has 17-yarder in there also. So think about that. Basically, the rest of his carries, 16 for 33. Ooh, woof.
Yeah.
But it's Alexander Madison's your next guy. Amir Abdullah, I don't think he played. He didn't get any carries. I know the stat. DJ Turner with the touchdown for the Raiders. So that, and then Trey Tucker with a rushing touchdown. So a lot of non-fantasy production in this game all around there. Also a pretty low fantasy game in LA between the Chiefs and the Chargers. Rashee Rice. And that's a brutal injury for the Chiefs. It's brutal for fantasy. It looks like it's a torn ACL, and it happened really early in this game too.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me personally. I have a ton of Rashee Rice. I also have a ton of Cooper Kupp, and I have those guys paired on some teams. I have one team where I have Rice, Kupp, and Devontae Smith. I might just not be starting any receivers next week. We'll have to see. But this was, as somebody who had Chiefs -7 in the Circa contest, you knew right away we were doomed, and we ended up getting a push. I'll live with that, but could not have been a more disastrous start. Chiefs are moving the ball. Carson Steele fumbles at about the 25-yard line of the Chargers. You're like, all right, here we go. Chargers go right down, score a touchdown. First play on the next drive, Patrick Mahomes throws that pick. Just a terrible throw by Mahomes, like wildly overthrew his target, picked off. And then it's, of course, Patrick Mahomes who ends up tearing Rashee Rice's ACL. That's the early indication, at least. And Jeff, as well as I do, when we start to get these tweets that the Chiefs fear it's a torn ACL, it's almost always a torn ACL. Yes. I mean, Rashee Rice is essentially done for the year. And obviously there might be a suspension coming on top of this, right? So I think the injury happened early enough in the season that it's conceivable that Rashee Rice could be ready for week 1 next year, but he also might be hit with, suspension on top of that. And you can't start serving the suspension until you're active. So, I mean, this is a bigger conversation that we'll have, when we start preparing for 2025 drafts, but just a kind of bizarre situation as far as what his value is in longer term fantasy leagues. Carson Steele was essentially benched after that fumble, also fumbled in week 2 against Cincinnati as well. So I think there is maybe a compounding effect there. He played a few snaps throughout the second half, but they really turned things over to Kareem Hunt with Samaje Perine mixing in as well.
Yeah, of course, Perine gets the goal line carry and the touchdown, of course. And after Hunt got it down to the 2, he's like, and he did the feed me motion and then got pulled. I thought that was funny. Jonathan has Rashee Rice, also has Devontae Adams. So waiver wire guys to pick up to replace Rice. Who do you prefer among these? Wan'Dale Robinson, Xavier Legette, Wicks, Dontavian Wicks, Brian Thomas Jr., and Ladd McConkey. Some good options on the waiver.
Really good options.
Yeah.
These are great options. I would order them Thomas Wicks, McConkey, and Wan'Dale in that order, and then Legette would be 5th. I mentioned the tough matchups coming up for Carolina. That's the biggest fear there. I mean, Brian Thomas should be rostered in every league at this point. I think the fact that he's out there, it's like, it's terrible that you're missing Devontae Adams, who's week to week, and then Rashee Rice, who's likely done for the year. But if you could step up Brian Thomas, I think you actually might be in okay shape going forward. So some really good options there. I would say there's a lot of leagues where none of those guys are available, or maybe 4 of those guys are already claimed.
Yeah, I kind of like Wicks a little bit more just because I think Green Bay is going to throw the ball a ton. But then again, we'll see about that. Wicks can't catch though too, so there is that.
Well, I think with no Watson though, he's going to see a ton of opportunity.
Yeah, he is. He is. So yeah, I just think just a realization though, people play in various different types of leagues, home leagues, family leagues, 8-team leagues, 10-team leagues. These type of guys are available sometimes, so it does happen there. But yeah, the Chargers, they had a chance to win this game. They got stopped in downs, and when it was 10-10 in the third quarter, deep in the Chiefs territory there. That was a massive turn in this game. They missed a field goal, which never happens. So they had their chances in this one there too. So, but the Chiefs defense kind of won the day. The Chargers were trying to play without their 2 starting tackles. It was kind of, they almost stole one, but they didn't. Well,
I mean, and they honestly, I thought they probably should have won this game. I mean, the Chiefs were getting nothing offensively until that long touchdown to Xavier Worthy, which was an incredible throw by Patrick Mahomes to put that on a spot. The Chiefs only had 3 drives in the second half too. It's like, as somebody who was more concerned about the Chiefs covering 7 than winning the game outright, they just didn't have opportunities, right? I mean, this was not a team that, like, you take Rashee Rice out of the equation, obviously no Hollywood Brown. I mean, those are supposed to be your number 1 and number 2 receivers for the year. And I think it's easy to look at the Chiefs and be like, what is wrong with Mahomes? What's wrong with this offense? You take those 2 receivers away, I think just about any offense would struggle without its top 2 pass catchers. So I wonder if there's a move coming for Kansas City. I mean, this is a team that I think is hell-bent on trying to win 3 straight, as they should. Do they inquire on Devontae Adams? Do they inquire on Amari Cooper, who, the way Amari Cooper's trade or contract breaks down, he's extremely tradable. I think there's going to be a lot of teams asking about him. I think if you're the Chiefs, you got to be aggressive.
Agreed. I think the Raiders would be loath to trade Adams to the Chiefs.
Right.
But you never know. Maybe it could happen there. We'll see about that there. Is Mahomes even a must start against the Saints next week? I don't know. I hate betting against him. They did establish Kelsey. Worthy's still there. Yeah, but Mahomes hasn't been a massive fantasy quarterback. That's for sure. Too.
I don't think he's a must start. He doesn't have a single week yet where he's even been a top 12 quarterback. Yeah, I mean, at some point you think it's going to come around, but you take Rice out of the equation. Hollywood's not coming back. They were able to get Travis Kelce going a little bit. He was targeted 9 times, 7 for 89. I mean, by Travis Kelce standards this season, that's like a monster game. I think that's going to become more routine. I think we're going to see more Travis Kelce by default. Even if the Chiefs kind of wanted to manage him on the fly, you can't really get away with that now without Rashee Rice. So, but I don't know that doesn't help Patrick Mahomes fantasy wise. I think losing Rashee Rice is a killer for him. I don't think he's a must start by any means. No.
Well, yeah, I get you on that. And the thing is too, though, it's like they can't just turn to the running game either, though, because Pacheco's gone. Yes, Kareem Hunt ran okay. And maybe that he'll become a thing. We'll see. It transitions into our next game here, which is Saints Falcons. The Falcons won without scoring an offensive touchdown. And that it's not just like a fun snippet fact. it reflects what happened in this game. The Falcons offense is kind of problematic. I have issues. Cousins only got sacked one time, but that offensive line isn't great. They're just not firing on all cylinders.
The Falcons were so lucky to win this game. I think this is not a team that is well coached offensively. I think we continue to see bizarre usage patterns for Bijan Robinson, who had like his lowest usage game of his career, essentially. I mean, he outsnapped Tyler Algier 36-21, but Algier outcarried him 8-7, just 11 touches in this game for Bijan Robinson. Atlanta continues to kind of turtle up offensively. It's like they're moving the ball, and then they just go to this ultra conservative short passes, quick passes behind the line of scrimmage. It's like they're still playing like they don't trust Kirk Cousins. Atlanta got a huge stop, just under 4 minutes left in this game. Stuffed New Orleans near the goal line on a 4th down. And you're like, all right, all you got to do at this point is you get a first down, maybe 2 first downs, the game's over. But you get at least one, you're forcing New Orleans into a spot where they have to start burning timeouts, and they're going to be in desperation mode. They burned 20 seconds off the clock and only forced New Orleans to use one timeout. They ran the ball. New Orleans called timeout. Incomplete pass. Or no, the pass on 3rd down was completed, and then Tyler Algier runs out of bounds. Yeah. It was just bizarre. I mean, it's like you don't necessarily have to score there. You're pinned against your goal line. You don't want to take chances and have a turnover. I get that. But what you can't do is force New Orleans to burn one timeout and only take 20 seconds off the clock and then punt from your own end zone, and New Orleans takes over in Atlanta territory. It was just brutal to watch.
Yeah, I mean, the whole game was brutal to watch. I mean, the Falcons got 14 points, as pointed by Chuck Nola pointed out. I mean, they got the muffed touchdown, punt where they didn't have to worry about it advancing it. What was Rashid Shaheed thinking trying to catch that ball? Oh, my God.
He's catching it. Like, he ended up kind of facing the end zone, trying to catch it. Like, you're at the 2-yard line, dude. Like, why do you even want to fair catch this? Yeah, I mean, that was really one of the themes of the week was just poor punt catching, I suppose. And, yeah, they didn't have to worry about the advancement there. They were able to just dive on that. Got the pick 6 later. Yeah, Atlanta is just a confounding team, man. I don't understand the Algier versus Bijan usage. I mean, at least Algier, he was getting you like 7.5 yards per carry. It's not like he wasn't effective. Kyle Pitts, 3 targets, 0 catches. Just gave you a fat 0 this week, Jeff.
Yeah, and then after the game, he was asked about it, and Raheem Morris like, stats are for nerds and all that. Okay, yeah, because you coached such a great game there, dude. Yeah, you nailed it there. Yeah. It's such a dysfunctional offense right now. Pitts dropped the ball. It was a tough play on a slant. He got hit pretty close to it. But again, you're this generational player, theoretically. You got to hold on to it there. And they just kind of stopped going to him. It was just they're such a weird team, and we can't blame Arthur Smith. Maybe we got to blame Pitts a little bit there. Maybe he's not a good enough blocker to be a tight end. He's not a good enough receiver to command a lot of targets. Maybe that's the real answer here. We keep thinking we want to make him into something he isn't. But it's just so frustrating. He used to be that guy. Maybe he's just not the same since the knee injury. I don't know.
Yeah, that's very possible. Very possible. And again, it was targeted 3 times. He's still running plenty of routes. Like, there's not really concerns about like the overall workload. In passing situations, he's out there. He's just not. He's not getting the target volume that you would hope. Drake London, by the way, targeted 12 times in this game, only caught 6 of them for 64 yards. Which, considering how this game went offensively for Atlanta, you kind of take that. But it continues to be Darnell Mooney and Ray McLeod who are responsible for most of the big plays through the air.
Yeah, it is. And they got the bailout on the PI. If without that PI call, they don't win. Younghoe Koo with the 58-yarder.
Well, and that was the other thing. So you get the PI call, and then they start taking like big shots downfield. It's like,
I know.
A few more yards, like run a 5-yard out. They'll probably give you that. It's like it shouldn't have come like great on Younghoe Koo to hit that field goal. It should not have come down to a 58-yarder. I'm baffled by some of Raheem Morris's decisions.
Yes, exactly. Me too. It just. Or whoever the offensive coordinator is, it's not, because Morris is a defensive-minded guy too. Just ugh. All right. We'll go from one ugh to another. We'll go Rams and Bears. Bears got the win. They had some good moments in this one. I'll give them some credit, but it's interesting. There was a Jay Glazer report before the game how like Caleb Williams and the 2 tight ends went to go to Shane Waldron to complain about the offense, some of the play calling and all that. And it's just, DeAndre Swift actually ran well. We buried him and he actually had a good game. A lot of late work that was doing all the work there, but this was a sloppy game. Wind played a factor in this one. Rams had a field goal just blown completely sideways there. So it happens, but this was a don't touch game for both of us going into the game, and it kind of played out that way.
Yeah, Rams had their chances. I mean, they had the ball down 6 with with a little over a minute left, and you're thinking, all right, Matthew Stafford, we've seen him in these situations before. Immediately threw a pick, just a terrible pick. Not that the chances of at that point driving 92 yards for the game winning touchdown were all that high. But that drive, that was first play of the drive. It just never even had a chance to threaten. Rams were 1 of 4 in the red zone, settled for a lot of field goals on what looked like promising drives. Matthew Stafford also had a fumble deep in his own territory in the second quarter that led directly to the first touchdown of the game for the Chicago Bears. I don't want to get fooled by DeAndre Swift, right? I mean, not only were we told that this was the Roschon Johnson week, it was not. We saw a little bit of Roschon. He had a touchdown, but it was really DeAndre Swift, 16 carries for 93 yards, ripped off his first real long run of the season, a 36-yarder. Was involved in the passing game, heavily involved, 7 for 72, caught all 7 of his targets. Nobody saw this week coming for DeAndre Swift. I'm not fully buying in yet. I think we need to keep in mind just how terrible this Rams defense is. I think that's really what allowed the Bears to do what they did.
Yeah.
I still didn't think Caleb Williams was all that good. I mean, he was fairly efficient, 17 of 23, a lot of overthrows, a lot of misses, specifically when he's targeting DJ Moore for whatever reason. That just seems to be something they can't get over. Like he had a couple of times where DJ Moore is, streaking open down the field. A lot of overthrows from Caleb Williams.
Wide open in the end zone one time, just completely airmailed him. Absolutely. I mean, Moore at least got a touchdown there. After a few good weeks, Roma Dunze had 3 targets. I started him in one league.
Yeah.
Keenan Allen coming back kind of gums up the works a little bit, but he only got 3 targets in his own right. They're taking the ball out of Caleb Williams' hands a little bit here, as opposed to Jaden Daniels. They're having Williams be kind of managing the game when possible. I think they'd like to be able to do that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no question. I mean, it's the first time all year they've had any semblance of a run game. And I think that takes a ton of pressure off of Caleb Williams. And we'll see if that continues. Again, I remain skeptical. I mean, the larger sample implies that this is still a very bad running team. But, you look at the upcoming schedule for the Bears. This team is still alive, I think, for a playoff berth. I thought it was kind of crazy that, there's a win total out there of like 8.5, 9.5. The schedule is really easy going forward. I mean, they get the Panthers, the Jaguars, the Commanders, the Cardinals, and the Patriots in their next 5 games. Those are either bad teams or really bad defenses, right? It's like maybe you don't feel great about
winnable
games
games
right now, but yeah, these are all winnable games. These are spots in which, in theory, you should still be able to move the ball on the ground. So even though I think we're still a little disappointed in what we've seen from Caleb Williams, I think that baseline ground game should at least be better over the next month or so. Meanwhile, the Rams still going to be without Cooper Kupp, it feels like, for at least one more week. They are home for the Green Bay Packers in week 5. I worry about that defense going up against Green Bay.
Yeah, and then they get to bye in week 6. Then they have 2 games like bang, bang right after that. They're talking Nakua not until week 8, by the way, too. Tutu Atwell, 4 for 82. He was the primary guy 2 weeks in a row. Jordan Whittington was getting more and more involved in the offense. Low-key disappointed in Demarcus Robinson, 2 for 37. Not in him, but his usage. But yeah, this offense, it's tough to get going when you're missing these guys and you're missing that offensive line. It's just they're a tough team to watch right now.
Yeah, they are. And I have some interest in Jordan Whittington. Picked him up in a bunch of leagues. I know he was really disappointing in week 3, but he led the Rams in snaps, in routes, and in targets this week. And I thought we might see that last week against San Francisco. He's a name to monitor, especially, until Puka Nacua comes back, and, they probably get cut back after the bye, but he's always somebody that, is at risk of re-injury. I mean, it feels like there's a pretty decent chance that one of those guys could miss any game the rest of the way. So you're probably not necessarily starting Jordan Whittington unless you have a ton of injuries or you're in bye week jail. But he's, if you're kind of looking for a speculative receiver to just hang on to with your last spot, he's somebody I would monitor.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll close out with Niners Pats. This is pretty much the smash that people expected. The Pats kind of stayed frisky a little bit to keep it alive a little bit late, but this really was not much in question after the pick 6.
No, this one got away from the Patriots early, and that was kind of that. Just another game that I think is a reminder that this team just has no ability to generate big plays. We did see Antonio Gibson, rip off a big catch out of the backfield, but that was really it. Ramondre Stevenson lost another fumble. He's now fumbled in all 4 games to begin this season. Niners were able to control this game on the ground, as you'd expect, 24 for 123 in a score for Jordan Mason. Very weird game for Brock Purdy. I feel like every time red zone flashed to the Niners, like Brock Purdy is like winding up and whipping the ball as far as he possibly can. It was almost an Anthony Richardson type of stat line for him. 15 of 27, 288 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. Jawan Jennings, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, all three had catches for at least 38 yards. Jordan Mason had another big one as well. It was a boom or bust passing day for the Niners. It was either a huge play or nothing.
Yeah, Mason had a touchdown called back. That could have been a huge, massive day for Mason again.
Yeah.
Kittle got it was kind of a borderline call too. Actually,
I thought so too.
Kittle, I think, got the touchdown instead. So the guy that got the holding penalty instead got the touchdown, which seems really fair. But you know, at the same time, hey, tight end scoring, that's noteworthy. Yeah, not a whole lot else to say about this one here. Niners needed this.
Yeah, Niners needed it. George Kittle is on the week, the tight end 4. I mean, that is in 2024. That's what 4 for 45 and a touchdown gets you. I mean, not only is that just like an okay day, but you will take that every day of the week in fantasy when it feels like getting 15 points is the equivalent of like 30 points for a tight end. Last thing I'll say on this game is the usage for Jordan Mason continues to be really encouraging. I mean, there has been really no sign of them wanting to get anyone else involved. Like we saw a lot of Kyle Juszczyk in this game. He was, used a little bit in the passing game, had another reception that was called back. They're mixing in Isaac Arendo, but barely. Only played 5 snaps. I mean, Jordan Mason is dominating the workload, and I don't think that's going to change until CMC is back.
Right, and they're talking November now for CMC too. But that's always the Shanahan way. It seems like he has that one back, and then when McCaffrey's back, it'll be McCaffrey getting the same usage. Mason, it'll be like, thank you, Jordan. Now step into the secondary role like this here.
Yeah, thank you for your service. They get the Cardinals next week, by the way. That should be a really good spot. But after that, tough stretch of schedule after that.
Yeah.
Seattle, KC, Dallas, Tampa Bay, Seattle, Green Bay, Buffalo in their next 7 games after that Cardinals matchup.
Absolutely. So this is a big stretch for them. That's why this was a necessary but not sufficient game also for the Niners there. That's going to wrap up today's show. Thanks for everybody tuning in, streaming live with us here. Catch us tonight on the SiriusXM Fantasy Show. And you catch our sneaky ads video later on as well. We're everywhere. We're talking a lot today. So hopefully we won't be sick of each other by the end of the night, but it's Monday. That's what we do. Any other parting thoughts?
No. Looking forward to the Monday night doubleheader. Like you said, if you're listening to this on Monday or you're watching us live, make sure you check us out on SiriusXM Fantasy. We are there from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern. We'll be giving you live look-ins on Seattle, Detroit. We'll do live look-ins for Tennessee, Miami, if there are any. If either team enters the red zone at any point, we'll let you know. But should be a really fun show tonight, and hope you guys will join us.
Yeah, I need some Will Levis hilarity there for one of my teams, but so for the Dolphins defense. So let's go. Let's get this here. All right, but everybody, thanks to Underdog, to Circa, and Vivid Seats. Thank you for listening. If you like this show, please like and subscribe. Please also go to RotoWire. Check us out, rotowire.com/try. Thanks for listening, everybody. Take care.